U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says America is committed to increasing efforts against the Islamic State. How medical simulators are being used to prevent pregnancy-related deaths. And a shocking announcement from an American television star whose turbulent personal life has made headlines for years. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. German special police have arrested 5 people, 3 of them foreign nationals, in an operation linked to last Friday's massacre in Paris, according to Reuters. Tuesday's operations took place in the western city of Aachen, close to Germany's border with Belgium and the Netherlands. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the Islamic State group will feel even greater pressure in the coming weeks as the U.S., France and other allies increase their efforts against the terrorist group. Kerry spoke in Paris after meeting Tuesday with French President François Hollande and discussing different ways in which their governments can be more effective in battling the Islamic State. The talks came days after a series of shootings and suicide bombings killed at least 129 people in Paris.
Let me just say that I express the condolences of President Obama and the people of the United States to President Hollande and thanked him for the extraordinary response of the French people, the courage that they have exhibited. We talked about the significant steps that we believe we can take together in a number of different areas to increase our efforts and be more effective even against Daesh.
President Hollande has vowed to hit the militants without mercy in Syria, where he said the Paris attacks were planned. Meanwhile, the French Interior Ministry says authorities carried out 128 raids overnight. That followed even more raids the night before that ended with police detaining 23 people and placing 100 more on house arrest, as well as officials saying they had identified the suspected mastermind behind the deadly assault. In Brussels, European Union Foreign Affairs Chief Federica Mogherini pledged full EU support for France's security efforts.
France has requested, as you know, aid and assistance in accordance with Article 42.7 of the treaties. Today, the European Union, through the voices of all the defense ministers of all the EU member states, unanimously expressed its strongest full support and readiness to provide all the aid and assistance required and needed.
French warplanes continued bombing Islamic State targets in Syria, hitting the group's de facto capital in Raqqa. The Defense Ministry said 10 of its jets took part in the latest airstrikes aimed at a command center and a recruiting site. Well, for more on the attacks, Lisa Bryant joins me live via Skype from Paris. Lisa, first, what is the latest on the investigation and the hunt for the perpetrators?
There have been, good morning or good afternoon. There have been a few new events that have been reported. As you've noted in your in the introduction, there have been arrests apparently made by the German authorities. In France, there have been a few new discoveries. Apparently, another car has been found in the 18th arrondissement of Paris that could have been linked to the attackers. Also 2 safe houses outside of Paris in 2 suburbs not far away that the terrorists are believed to have stayed in. In addition to that, there have been, as you noted, a number of different arrests that have taken place last night and early this morning. About 100 people have been detained, house arrests, and then probably about 24 so far have faced real arrest. And of course, there have been also movements in Belgium by Belgian authorities, at least 2 of the perhaps the mastermind and one of the people who is still at large, that authorities suspect is still at large, have been their family have been questioned, and there's more information about their background and links to Syria. So that's just among.
Now, Lisa, how is the mood and the tempo of life in Paris?
Well, the mood is kind of a mix. French are feeling sad. They're feeling defiant. This evening, there's been a huge call for French to show up at bistros and restaurants. It's called Tous à Bistrot, all to the bistros, because we remember that on Friday that the terrorists attacked several night spots around Paris. So the idea is the French have to go out and just basically show that they are unafraid of terrorism. And so hopefully.
There's a question of the refugees. We know that one at least was connected, not confirmed yet. But how are people reacting to this? What are people saying now?
Again, it's a mix. It's not just the refugees. There's a real fear among Muslims. Remember, France has Europe's largest Muslim community, that they could be stigmatized and targeted unfairly. Many showed up for the moment of silence yesterday. They are speaking out. On Friday, there's going to be a mass call for Muslims to show up at the Paris Mosque. And there's also a fear that migrants, the refugees coming from Syria, may also be targeted because of a Syrian passport found and links that have been perhaps.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much for your reporting. We'll keep watching this developments there. Viewers, Lisa Bryant reporting live via Skype from Paris. Here in the United States, and the aftermath of last week's attacks in Beirut and Paris, New York City is deploying a specially equipped 500-member critical response command to protect the city and stop future organized acts of terror. VOA's Ramon Taylor reports.
New Yorkers have rallied to France's side. On Monday, they honored those who lost their lives with a rendition of La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, during a somber ceremony at New York's 9/11 memorial. The Consul General of France, who was in attendance, called Friday's attacks the deadliest on French soil since World War II.
It was an act of war. Today, France is at war.
City leaders, meanwhile, held a ceremony of their own, announcing the deployment of a special unit of 500 police officers and 8 K9 dogs, tasked to protect the city and strengthen its counter-terrorism efforts.
With this new critical response command, we can say more certainly than ever before that no city in America is better prepared to defend against terrorism. No city in America is better prepared to respond to terrorism than New York City.
New York City Police Commissioner William Bryant boasted about the capabilities of the special unit, equipped with M4 semi-automatic weapons and enhanced smartphone technology, in its ability to gather intelligence and prevent attacks, as well as to run toward danger when necessary.
They have been trained and will receive continuous, expanding training on dealing with active shooter scenarios such as we've just recently witnessed in Paris, France, so that we will have, at any given time, there'll be 100 some odd of these officers on duty in the city.
Bratton said the unit's forces must not only be focused on significant tourist destinations, such as Times Square, but also on soft targets, such as restaurants and concert venues, as demonstrated in last week's tragedies. He said that by June 2016, the city will have added 2,000 additional police officers, capable of dealing with up to 24 simultaneous attacks in the city. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
Well, a political firestorm has erupted in the U.S. over the admittance of Syrian refugees in light of the attacks in Paris. VOA's Michael Bowman reports from Capitol Hill, where many Republicans are questioning or rejecting President Barack Obama's plan to admit 10,000 Syrian asylum seekers, while Democrats say America must remain open to refugees once thoroughly screened.
Horrific carnage in France could be repeated on American soil if terrorists infiltrate U.S.-bound refugees, according to the president's Republican critics.
This country can see that kind of thing happening here.
Sessions wants to halt the arrival of Syrian refugees until Congress can vote on whether to admit them at all.
If you're not able to do a background check sufficiently, vet the applicants, you're not able to do that, then you're going to be admitting a certain number of people who have terrorist tendencies.
Democrats note that those seeking refuge in the United States are subjected to background checks that take months or even years.
The vetting process involves many agencies. It takes a long period of time, and we do make sure that they have no affiliations with any terrorist organizations and certainly not involved with ISIL.
Republicans want to know how any refugee from a failed state or a war zone like Syria can be properly vetted.
When you have a country that there's no central database to pull from, how in fact do you know what the backgrounds of these individuals are?
A House Democrat says utmost care is warranted.
I don't want terrorists to come here masquerading as refugees. And I think we have to be very, very, very careful who we admit to this country. But I think a blanket slamming the door and having zero compassion whatsoever is not the way to go.
Cardin agrees.
We have a very open society. We're not going to let the terrorists win and change our way, the way that we operate our country.
The issue is gaining attention far from Washington. More than 20 Republican governors have said they do not want Syrian refugees settled in their states. Michael Bowman, VOA News, the Capitol.
Well, the head of Russia's security service says last month's deadly plane crash in Egypt's Sinai region was a terrorist act and that explosives were found on both the wreckage and luggage from the aircraft. In a meeting chaired by Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Federal Security Service chief confirmed their findings to reporters.
Владимирович, проведены исследования личных вещей, багажа.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, we have studied personal belongings, luggage, and parts of the plane which crashed over Egypt on October 31st. According to the results of carried-out tests on those items I have mentioned, traces of an explosive of foreign origin have been found. According to an analysis by our specialists, a homemade bomb containing up to 1 kilogram of TNT detonated during the flight, causing the plane to break up in mid-air, which explains why parts of the fuselage were spread over such a large area. We can unequivocally say it was a terrorist act.
The FSB also announced a $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of those responsible. Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to find and punish whoever was responsible and called for the country's partners to help identify the culprits. The Metrojet A321 flight from the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh was headed to St. Petersburg on October 31st when it crashed in the Sinai Peninsula, killing all 224 people on board. Militants with links to the Islamic State group have claimed responsibility for the attack. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, how cutting-edge technology could help reduce maternal and child mortality on the continent. Stay with us.
This is Green Beat for a healthier planet.
Green is more than just the color of the walls in this apartment in Sweden. The apartment building in Malmö has a rooftop turbine as well as solar panels, substantially reducing its carbon footprint. Residents like Peter Byrne also lower energy costs with the use of a monitoring app.
I could follow what things in the apartment that actually drives the energy usage.
The building was developed by Nordic energy supplier E.ON as a testing ground for smart home technologies. Within its walls is an energy management system for renewables such as solar, wind, and biogas. Here's Pierre Rosen, the building's project manager.
In the future, I believe that households will have a lot more information about how they use their energy and how it affects the environment.
The building is just one part of a commitment to a greener lifestyle by the entire city of Malmö, which aims to be climate neutral by 2030. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Rwanda's Senate on Tuesday unanimously approved a draft constitution to allow President Paul Kagame to seek a third term in office. The ruling clears the path for a referendum that is not expected to face much opposition. Senate Chief Bernard Makuza says he expects the changes to be approved in a referendum. Kagame, whose current term ends in 2017, could run for another 7-year term and then 2 5-year terms, possibly keeping him in power until 2034. Kagame is the latest long-serving ruler in Africa attempting to extend his hold on power. Kagame, in power since 2000, won widespread praise for ending a genocide in 1994 of some 800,000 people, most of them Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Now, for more insight into what a third term for Kagame means for Rwandans, David Himbara, a political analyst and former economic advisor to Mr. Kagame, joins me live via Skype from Toronto in Canada. Welcome to Africa 54, Dr. Himbara.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much.
Yes. And now, first, you know, they say Mr. Kagame has not made it clear that he's going to run, but is open to persuasion. What does that mean to you?
Well, basically, it's a game. It's a game he's played. He wants to be seen as not going against his own word when he said that he would not change the constitution to stay in power. So he wants to make it look as if he's on the side and that it's the nation that loves him so much that can't do without him.
Yes. Now, of course, the country has made a lot of progress since 1994. He's credited for so much of that progress. Would that necessarily mean that the people love him so much they want him to stay in power longer?
I think that if Paul Kagame was claiming that he revived the economy, he prevented Rwanda from being a failed state, he has improved socioeconomic indicators, at least better than what his predecessor was. If that was a claim, it would be perfectly acceptable. But when he claims to have built a Singapore of Africa, that's when then things get out of hand. That country remains among the poorest. It's 50% aid dependent. The economy is still informal, largely informal. That's a country where only 4% of the population have access to electricity. 84% basically use biomass, and 11 use petroleum. Mm-hmm. So there is no way that people are voting because, that people love him because of economic development. But rather, it's more like he has a totalitarian state that controls everything, that has driven fear into the population, that watches everybody. So if you don't watch, if you don't behave the way you are expected to behave, then
now, tell me, yes, what is your #1 fear for the future of Rwanda in that kind of state?
Well, it's a repeat. It's a repeat of previous situations. This is a country that has never, ever, whether before colonialism or after colonialism, this is a country that has never seen any peaceful transfer of power. The leader in power mm-hmm. basically gets killed by the one who replaces him.
Okay.
And then the whole thing starts again. That's how Kagame came to power, and that's how Habyarimana before him came to power.
Well, we hope that doesn't happen. I hope something changes. Thanks a lot, Mr. Himbara, and we'll come to you again some other time so you can share with us your thoughts. Thanks. David Himbara is a political analyst and former economic advisor to Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Welcome back. Linord Moudou is on assignment, but we have a special report from her on medical simulators. The World Health Organization says hundreds of women die each day from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. Operative Experience Incorporated is a U.S.-based company with a mission to revolutionize surgical and pre-hospital training using innovative medical simulators to train medical professionals. Linord Moudou spoke to Mick Nevin, the company's CEO.
Well, Operative Experience is the first company in the world to make what we call hands-in-the-body surgical simulators. These are simulators with lifelike tissue that you can operate on with standard surgical instruments. It is for teaching surgical procedures. It is for teaching hemorrhage control in pre-hospital or terrorism or combat type of situations, and for teaching a full suite of obstetrics simulations as well.
So what did it take to create such a prototype?
Our founder is a trauma surgeon, but he's also an inventor. Once we started with the military, we recognized that the tissue properties we were developing and the approach we had to training applied to things beyond the military. So once we set our mind to do the C-section, we consulted experts because we want to make sure our anatomy is correct. These are not plastic models. They are anatomically correct with tissue with lifelike feel.
Is it already in use?
Ones for combat casualty care have been in use for a number of years throughout the military, the State Department, the U.S. Marines. The obstetrical simulators are being used at Basel University in Switzerland. They're being used at the Mayo Clinic, the University of Michigan, Stanford, a number of medical schools in the United States. Not yet in Africa, but that's where we hope to have the biggest impact.
And for the C-section purpose, how long is the training?
Let me tell you just a little background. There's a couple of countries in Africa that train their midwives to do C-sections. Mozambique and Tanzania are two that come to mind. They train them over 3 to 4 years. But it doesn't take 3 to 4 years to learn to do the C-section. You can learn to do the C-section pretty quickly. It takes that long for them to experience the many complications. With us, we can give them the complication, train to proficiency in that over and over, and then move on to the next complication. So we believe that rather than 3 to 4 years of training, we can train in 3 to 4 weeks, and we can train them more thoroughly in managing complications than they would get trained in the field. And if I might say, we can probably train them and give them more experience in managing complications than even obstetrical residents will get in the United States.
How often can these simulations be used?
The way we train, though, is we break it down into its parts. So the students will learn how to make the incisions properly over and over and over. They'll learn how to get through all the layers. They'll learn how to incise the uterus. And then once they're proficient at that, then we'll teach them to come out, how to sew up the uterus, how to repair all the tissue that they've gone through. Then we have a separate simulator where they learn to deliver the baby in various presentations, in breeches with the cord around the neck and different things like twins, so they can practice the delivery. So we break it down in all the steps so they're proficient. Now, even when we get to things like postpartum hemorrhage control, we have our simulator bleeds. It can bleed from a number of different sites. The professor controls that bleeding very simply with valves, with switches. So, but they don't have to then do the full C-section in order to experience a hemorrhage. We start with an open abdomen in that case. It can be used by midwives to take them from minimal knowledge up to a high level of knowledge for sure. But it also supports physician training who haven't experienced, I mean, even practicing physicians may not see certain complications for years, so it's for retraining. And also for the new types of devices and techniques that are used, for example, in controlling postpartum hemorrhage.
Okay.
You want to slide your hand under the baby's head.
Oh, I'm choking the baby. It looks so real.
It's attached to the placenta too, so you can reach in and here's the placenta. You deliver that next. Now in training, what we do is it's easy to load the baby in the back, and we can put the baby in breech positions, we can put twins, we can put the cord around the neck. And so a midwife or someone training can do over and over and over deliveries of the baby in all sorts of different positions to learn how to do that.
Thanks a lot, Lenona. It's time for a short break, and still to come on Africa 54. A bombshell revelation by the man who was once television's highest paid actor. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Egypt, the country lights the Giza pyramids and pays tribute in honor of those killed in the Paris terrorist attacks. In Guinea, the last known case of Ebola is cured as the countdown to the end of the epidemic that claimed over 2,500 lives in the country begins. In Nigeria, government settles allocations for subsidized gasoline imports as fuel shortages resurface for the first time since May. Finally, in Senegal, the country's main and most popular mode of transportation, the car rapids, will soon be replaced by new buses. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Esther Githui-Ewart, and here's what's trending. Actor Charlie Sheen revealed he is HIV positive Tuesday in an exclusive interview on NBC's Today Show. Sheen said he was diagnosed roughly 4 years ago, but doesn't know how he contracted it. He also insisted it was impossible that he knowingly transmitted the virus to others. While he admitted he had unprotected sex with 2 people since the diagnosis, both were informed ahead of time and have been under the care of his doctor. Sheen said he made the announcement to stop a smear campaign and extortion efforts. The revelation renewed a spotlight on Sheen's troubled history with drug addiction, pornography, and prostitutes. Next up, some of Nigeria's hottest designers gathered in the commercial capital of Lagos to take part in this year's edition of the Lagos Fashion and Design Week. Designers wowed audiences with an elaborate array of African-inspired creations, showing why Nigeria is fast becoming one of the continent's premier fashion destinations. Lagos Fashion Week featured over 40 designers. Beyond the runway, the organizers of the event said they want to reposition fashion as a useful tool for commerce and creativity in a country with high unemployment rates that is largely dependent on oil. And finally, a wonderful discovery in the Israeli town of Lod. This Roman-era mosaic is believed to be 1,700 years old, depicting scenes of animals and hunting. The mosaic floor was discovered by archaeologists while they were building a visitor center meant to display another mosaic discovered 2 decades earlier in the same location. Israel's Antiquities Authority says the newly discovered mosaic measures 11 meters by 13 meters and once paved the courtyard of a villa in an affluent neighborhood that stood during the end of the Roman era and the start of the Byzantine Empire. And that's what's trending today. Vincent.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 800 and 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.